This is Sessions with Sara Cate and Ashley, a podcast that explores the feelings, emotions, and experiences of what it means to be human in this world. This podcast is intended for educational purposes only and is not meant to replace therapeutic services of any kind. Please refer to the list of references if you need support.
And before you dive in, please like, subscribe, comment, share with anyone you think might also connect with today's session. Our goal is to reach as many people as possible, and we are endlessly grateful for your continued support. So, let's get to it. Woo! Okay. Yep.
All right, welcome everyone to another Sessions with Sara Cate and Ashley. I'm Sara Cate.
I'm Ashley.
Today's session takes a little bit of a different direction, I think, than something we've covered in a good bit of time, which hopefully you all are like, yes, something new, right? We're not like, no, stay in your lane, so we wanted to bring this conversation of like advocacy around your own healing. And that doesn't just, we're not talking like just specifically mental health. We're not talking just specifically physical health. But we're kind of opening up a dialogue around the immense, which it is, responsibility for you to advocate for what you feel like you need when it comes to healing in whatever area of your life that is. And Ashley can dive into it a little bit more, but she's been having some interesting pointed conversations with clients as of late. And so we thought we might bring this again to you all, because it always seems to be what's up in our caseload often is what's up in the
collective. That's like what shows up. So I was telling Sara Cate, like just today I had another conversation with someone about how to play an active role in your recovery. And so in this specific instance, it was about like their physical pain. But I want to just like actually pause there for a second and like acknowledge the like lifetime of belief that is instilled in us that we like just trust the doctor in front of us or just trust whatever professional is in front of us.
Whatever professional. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there has become this like phenomena, I don't know what even to call it, that like you walk into somebody's office who may be an expert in that subject matter. But then we equate that to them being the expert of our body, but that isn't equal. That's not the same. They may be subject matter expert. They may be a kidney specialist. And if I have a question about the kidneys, that's probably who I'm going to want to ask. Right.
Totally.
Does that mean that doctor is a expert of my body? No, because they haven't lived in my body. Right. And so like the conversation that I was having today was about how do we not walk into somebody's office and just sit down and say, okay, fix me. Right. How do we instead go sit into this office or wherever we're at and say, hey, I'm here because I need help and some guidance. And these are the things that I know to be true about my body. And then as we're having a conversation with this person, we're also asking ourselves, what does this feel like as it lands in my body? Does this resonate with me? Does this feel like it's just totally not right? Does this feel like maybe I just need more information, right? Do I just need to ask some questions because I'm a little bit confused? Or is this something where like I need to get a second opinion because this just really isn't feeling right? Because I don't know anybody who is an expert of Sara Cate's body other than Sara Cate. And I don't want anybody else to be the expert of her body. That is her body, right? But I think we are so ingrained from the time we are young that if we have a problem, we go to somebody else to fix it. And it's just like automatic. Not feeling good, call the doctor. Have like I broke my ankle, call this person, right? Like do this, do that, do that, instead of saying like, okay, wait a second. I'm not feeling well. what is it feeling like in my body? What kind of resources do I actually need and what feels good
Mm-hmm.
versus like, I'm just going to give all my power away to this person standing in front of me.
Mm-hmm. And I think to your point, there is absolutely a need
Oh,
for
yeah.
professional help.
Yes.
In all arenas of our lives, you
yes.
know? However, I think where we lose some of our ability to understand what we need is when we don't maybe ask the questions, or when we don't know maybe what questions to ask. Because I know a lot of people who like kind of go into a little bit of freeze when they're around a doctor or an expert of anything.
Yeah.
Right. And there is this, and if they're, and I know that for me, like I get such a helplessness around technology, and I like lose my mind because I don't know how to navigate it. And so there is this part of me that's just like, whatever, just tell me what to do and I'll fix it, like, or you just take care of it. There is that sense sometimes when we really feel off our depths that we want to hand it over because it's too terrifying, especially when it comes to our survival, our health. So I think we're not trying to say this isn't, like, don't trust people you go to for support or help or care. We're just saying use that then to bring it into your own system and be discerning. Try to, and even if that means having an advocate in the room with you, I know that helps me sometimes, is having a second set of ears to be like, okay, did you hear what they are saying? And what does that mean for me? Right. And to have kind of that curiosity of like, okay, I hear what you're saying. I hear the advice you're giving me. I hear the direction you're telling me to go. Again, outside of life-saving intervention, that like, okay, let me sit with that for a minute and let me see how that feels. Or like, for me, if I had a client who was like, I kind of want a second opinion if I were to give a diagnosis, let's say, I would say, yeah, okay, great. Let's have an assessment done. Right. Because if that doesn't feel relevant to you, and even for me, I go through the criterion whenever I give a diagnosis and I say, does that resonate? Does it not? Does that resonate? Does it not? Right. And like we explore it together, because for me, if those things aren't identifiable for themselves to some degree in their own systems, then that might not be the appropriate direction to take. Right. And then that's on me to help explore other alternatives. But I think, unfortunately, sometimes the ego that exists in these professional environments can be so intense that we just then are like, okay, they said to do this, so I'm going to do it. And I know so many people who have been inappropriately medicated because of that for mental health stuff. Right. And like then have really bad experiences because they just didn't feel, or they were too young, unfortunately, to advocate for themselves in some ways. But as adults, like, we do have a right to ask for guidance and to ask to advocate.
Yes. And so that is one of the things that I was like working with my client on, of like, and I gave her this example, and I like will say this to a lot of people, like, if you come lay on my table and ask me to fix you, the first thing I'm going to tell you is like, well, I can't, but I'm going to guide you. I'm going to be here to support you, but I can't fix you. But what I can do is answer a lot of your questions. So you have to throw all the questions you have at me, right? Like when I'm working with somebody who has like just had a baby and it's their first visit with me postpartum, they have a lot of questions because there was just a major change that happened in their body, right? And one of the best things of service I can do, because I have the education behind that, is to answer all of their questions. And so when you're in the room with these people, these experts, right, they have such a wealth of knowledge, and it's our opportunity to then ask all of the questions we want with this person who like literally has spent probably their entire life studying this material, And so like when we look at it like that, like, okay, this is my opportunity. I'll tell people this all the time, like, write down the questions you have so that when you get in there, it's not like, oh my gosh, I had all these questions I forgot, because we do get a little nervous, right? Or we don't want to like, whatever it is. But I will say that like in women's health world, which is like where I come from, it takes 4 extra years for women to get diagnoses than it does for our male counterparts. And there's something that really needs to be done about that. And so here's where
Makes me angry.
here's where this like is really, really, really important, because if we're not playing an active role in that, look at the years of suffering that we could have avoided if we were to say, that doesn't feel right. Them telling me that this is all in my head. I know this isn't all in my head. I'm going to go get a second opinion, or I'm going to go ask somebody for where they went, or like another referral, whatever it is.
Totally.
That's where we're going to get ourselves into trouble, because we don't deserve to have that happen ever, ever,
ever.
ever.
I mean, I had a client who her whole life was told that she essentially like didn't have endometriosis. And it wasn't endometriosis, and there was no way it was endometriosis. And because the only way to diagnose endometriosis is through surgery. So it's a pretty invasive experience. And so I think that might be a last case scenario for a lot of people to go in and find that out. Right. But because her care providers were like, no, no, no. And she went to the same care provider, but has always historically had so much pain. And finally went and had an initial experience with a new doctor. And the doc was like, I think you might. Right. And this poor woman for 15 years, of having periods has had excruciating levels of pain and discomfort, but it was normalized. And I had a friend that just had that experience and just finally had the surgery and is like instantly better. Right. But lived through years of diagnosis of the people, just doctors, care providers being like, you're fine. This is what it is. This is what having a period is. No fucking isn't. So there is this sense, right, of like, how do we continue, I guess, Ashley, is the question, right? Like, you're more in a medical professional space than I often am. And so like, and I deeply respect many doctors in my life. I have doctor clients. I have a best friend who is a doctor. Like, I deeply respect the field of medicine, especially when the care providers themselves have high integrity in the quality of care that they provide and the ability to be curious and ask questions. But like, how do we, right, if something like that is sitting with us and we're sitting in this, like, how do we continue to normalize this conversation of like, you get to ask questions, you get to advocate, especially when sometimes, especially around for females, around this like really sacred part of our body that probably carries a lot of trauma, unfortunately, for most of us. Like, how do we advocate for that? And like, how do we continue to build those conversations? Like, how do you help your clients ask you those questions?
So, okay. This is like, there's like multiple layers to this. But so some of the things that I will like first conversation kind of like recommend is what you already mentioned. One, if there is somebody available that can go with them, that now it's not just that somebody comes with you and you say like, hey, can you come to this doctor's appointment with me? It's that you have a conversation with them ahead of time that says like, hey, these are the concerns I have. And I need your support in those moments. This is how I normally respond, whether it's like being quiet or just saying like, yes, or like when they ask if I have questions and I say no, you can say like, oh, remember you asked me about this though. Do you want to do that? Right? Like, kind of, they help you jog your memory, or maybe they're the ones who just ask the questions for you. Right. But having, or like sometimes my clients and whoever goes with them will have like a symbol. Like if I'm like the person being seen and Sara Cate is with me and I'm starting to get really anxious and I know that, I'm going to like tap my knee 3 times so that Sara Cate knows like, okay, we're starting to get a little overwhelmed.
I'm going to
we might need to like take a little break. Sara Cate might need to jump in and say like, hey, Ashley, do you have any other questions? Do you want to talk to him about that thing that you were just talking to me about? Or would you like me to help explain that? Those types of things can be really helpful. I think when we are being dismissed, this is more challenging. I think practicing asking questions is a easier like start versus like when we're being dismissed to like fight back against that And again, in the world of women's health, this just happens
a lot
all the time. It's in our head, or we're told to just go take a bath and drink a glass of wine. And like, this still happens today, or that, like Sara Cate just had, literally, I just had a client who had 27 fibroids removed, but for years had been told that she was fine. One was the size of a grapefruit.
Oh my God.
Yeah. 27. And she's, anyways, besides the point. So,
because that's a whole nother rant.
Yeah. I'm like,
that's a whole other conversation for us.
Because you're about to hear some language if we go into that route.
Well, we know this ain't a PC show, so.
But one of the things that we can do in those moments is to just simply ask them to document in the chart that these were your specific concerns and that they're not being addressed. Or if you're asking, like this woman had been asking for a pelvic ultrasound or some more imaging, and they were like saying, you're fine, just like take some aspirin and like, or some Advil and like, you're fine. Right. I encourage them to say, okay, I would like it documented that I'm asking for further imaging and you are denying that. I would like that documented permanently in my chart, because it's going to stop some people in their tracks.
Right.
And I hate to say that that's even necessary sometimes,
but it might be.
To be honest, it is necessary sometimes. But here's the other thing. If you're to the point where you don't feel like, where you're being dismissed and you don't feel like you can say that, because that takes some practice to be, I'm not saying that that's easy, but if you're at that point, it's also okay just to be quiet and to get their little follow-up sheet that they give you, but then never go back. It is totally okay to be quiet, because to be honest, if you have to fight so hard for somebody to believe you, is that the provider that you want to be working with? Maybe not. And what I find is that a lot of people don't know that they have the option to change providers or to request somebody different or to go somewhere else. They don't even realize that that's an option. And for somebody on the outside looking in, we're like, yeah, of course, go somewhere else, right? But when when you're in the middle of like a crisis or like something is really going on, it's often hard to see what the actual choices are in front of you. It's so helpful to have somebody kind of point those out, So like, if that's the permission you need, is just to find somebody else, like, here's your permission,
Totally.
Yeah. And if you don't know who to go to, right, this is when you reach out to your network. You start asking your coworkers, right, who they go to, right? Just start making a list of names. But now you have options. Now you get to see that there's like other people out there. You can even like search your insurance, like who's in network with your insurance, like in a quick Google search, right? So like, there are ways around to find other providers. But yeah, those are some of the things that I'll like right away.
Yeah. And I think all of that to me lives around advocacy, right? And like the ability to take someone who can be an advocate for you if you feel like you can't, right? And especially if it's a very sensitive topic. Now, obviously, want to acknowledge here the privilege of the healthcare system and the Black and brown bodies that often are not able to get different layers of care and coverage, which is a huge issue in our communities and will become even greater depending on what happens moving forward. But just acknowledging, right, like sometimes maybe you don't have the ability to seek out a new provider. And I think that's where Ashley, when you said have this documented in my chart, I think is a really big way to advocate for yourself in that could create, because if your insurance doesn't cover it, or you don't have insurance and like this is your only option, being able to say, put that in my chart, like Ashley said, could kind of course correct someone who's dismissing symptoms that you might have. If seeking additional support isn't helpful. But I also love the ability to pull from your community too, because our communities are wealths of resources for us in that regard. I mean, anytime I'm looking for a recommendation, I'm asking my best friends who are all in the community, be like, where do you go for this? Where do you go for that? And that can be something as simple as an eye doctor to let's Reiki person, right? Like I'm always asking for a recommendation so I can kind of like get a sense of who that person might be first, right? And in that, especially with gynecological care, like that is something that I think is working with trauma survivors every day. It's important even for me as a professional to have a network of providers who I would trust sending my clients to, who I know will have more of a trauma-informed lens to their care, because it's deeply, deeply difficult. Doesn't matter what you're going for. If you've not had consensual things happen to the body that you exist in, it can be really, really hard in those spaces. So I think just the advocacy all around that Ashley was speaking to is such a big part of this. And knowing that it is a right that you have to ask questions to anybody, to your mechanic, to the person who makes your coffee in the morning,
literally, yes,
to your therapist. Like you get to say, I don't know. And that's something I'm very explicit with my clients when I first start working with them. I always say, I'm not the expert on your body, and if you don't feel like you are, then we're going to work together to figure out how you can become that. And you always get to tell me no. I might offer you a suggestion, an idea for an exercise or something that we might try, and you get to say no. Right. And I'm constantly trying to help clients recognize that they do have the right, even in a scenario like this, to be like, no, that doesn't sound like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to try that. And I'm like, great, use that no, like how many times we have to be able to say no before we realize we actually get to. And this gets to be a safe place to help kind of build that internal awareness that they get to say, here's the impulse for no, I'm going to say it. Right. And that the provider that's sitting across from them is not going to shut them down.
It's so important too, that you just brought up like the impulse, what that impulse to say no feels like, because when I say that to people, oftentimes they're like, well, if you think it's helpful, then let's do it. But it's like, well, what I think doesn't really matter. I mean,
totally.
Again, I'm here to like help guide and facilitate some things, but like, I'm not moving forward with this if this is not something that you want to move forward with. I'm not taking on that responsibility, right? Like 100%. That's not my place on your body, right? And it's still, it happens all the time. Women will look at me and be like, huh. It's almost like the first time where they're like, oh, okay. I really actually get to say yes or no, or like,
yes,
whatever it is. Right. And it's like, okay, we have to practice that. Like, that's not going to
have to practice that.
Normal to like all the time to say no if we haven't ever like felt like we could. It's not going to feel comfortable to ask questions to a doctor if we've never asked a doctor a question, right? So much of what we talk about on this is not like, okay, here's how you just like heal and get over all of this stuff. It's like, how are we going to find some comfort and some connection to ourselves in the midst of these things that are uncomfortable? And in this situation, that holds true also. Like, this isn't going to be always like feel amazing. However, when you're staying connected to yourself, if you have to think of yourself as somebody else, like your daughter, your best friend that you're trying to protect in that moment, and say like, no, I would ask these questions for her. Like pretend to be somebody else in that moment if you have to.
I love that. Yeah. I often say, who are you advocating for? Try somebody else who you would.
Right. And that kind of like well, not always, but it can be another tactic to help take some of that like fear out of it. But I wish that I could just like snap my fingers and like give you like the magic affirmation to say to yourself in these situations. It's not like that, but we have to practice. We have to practice. And maybe it is, you practice the next time you get your oil changed, you just ask a question, even if you know the answer, right?
Right.
Just ask a question that you would normally ask.
And be like, oh, no, thanks. That's actually not what I want to do.
Yeah.
Practice. I love that.
Yeah. Okay. Sara Cate, did you pull a little?
I did. We got the Two of Stones.
Wait. I don't think we've used this deck before.
We haven't. So this is the Gentle Tarot that Ashley and I are absolutely in love with. This is one of my all-time favorite decks in the entire world. Her name, I'm gonna try to say it as best I can, but it's Marisa Rice Aparicio Tovar, and we will link it in the show notes because it is just one of the, and especially it focuses on like mental health, but she is an indigenous woman to the Alaskan region, and she writes all about the different landscapes and animals and relations that exist up there, but through like a mental health and wellness lens. So it isn't a traditional style tarot, but it has just the richness of her indigenous roots and her belief systems and how to connect to the earth a little bit more beautifully and really, say in a sacred way. So good. So I pulled the Two of Stones. There's a glare right now. There we go. Perfect. Love it. Well, I surrender, trust, and tune into my balance. When life becomes too rigid, bend. The Two of Stones reminds us of how valuable it is to be flexible. When we adapt, we cultivate more freedom to move through obstacles, and we become more sure in our footing. This kind of fluidity allows us to better visualize possibility over hindrances. When we surrender control, we gain opportunity. The Two of Stones embodies an attitude of grace in all they do. They show us how to invite the energies of resilience and fluidity in the midst of adversity. The ever-grounded trust and harmony that shines through here is the result of centeredness. You might have to pivot and fall into greater trust. Trust births happiness. Happiness brings wholeness. Embrace your inner balance and knowing you are holding up too much. This is a healthy push to let some go. What is your intake gauge feeling like? Are you pretty balanced or are you overwhelmed? Are you grounded amidst everything you have going on? Are you stable or uncomfortably loose? If you find yourself in a healthy balance and embodying this Two of Stones energy, you are shining through and your effort is celebrated. If you've been taking on too much, tune into your center and parse out what you do not need to carry. That's a key part here. What is important to you right now? What does not deserve your attention? Making a list in response to both of the above questions is a great start. Organizing this list by priority is an additional step that may help you get you closer to your own balance. So good.
So good.
I just love, this like sense of flexibility, right? Which is to me linked with the curiosity that we were talking about, of like just being able to ask questions for any provider that you see, like, what is this supposed to feel like? Or if I feel this way, what might I be noticing? Right. Or I don't feel comfortable with that diagnosis. Can you walk me through that a little bit more? Or can I get a second opinion? Like that flexibility is what kind of comes up for me there. Yeah. But then also the, what you do not need to carry, right? Like if there's something that is like overwhelming you or making you feel like you can't discern what you need, what do you need to get out of the way so you can ask the questions that might get you better into your balance and into your relationship to your body, to be like, oh yeah, that does feel supportive, or nope, I know I need a second opinion. Yep. Yeah. Oh, I love that. I know, that's a good one. Gentle Tarot for the win, man. Every always time. For the win. It's always for the win. Ashley and I use that a ton. So this is just a little reminder to also take everything we said today with a grain of salt, right? Like if you have really incredible providers and you're like, I trust them, great. Listen to that trust in your body. And that is the goal. That is the hope. Like that is, but if you can, don't stop until you find them. Yes. And that's also like with friends and partners and that goes beyond this. Yeah. Exactly. Can you find that discernment within yourself? Can you find that trust to keep going until the right thing is in your path? Yeah. Okay. Well, as always, take care of yourselves until next time. Bye. Bye.